Hey, good evening. Welcome to another edition of Silent No More. Tonight, we're going to talk about something every single one of us has experienced: silence and letting go. Silence can be powerful, but it can also be painful. Sometimes we stay silent because we're healing. Sometimes we're silent because we're angry. Sometimes we're silent because we don't know what to say. And sometimes we're forced into silence because life changes and people leave. Tonight, we're asking, when is silence healthy? When is it harmful? Why is it letting go so difficult? And how do we find peace when we finally decide to release what no longer serves us? I couldn't think of a better person to have this conversation with than Clinton Murdoch. Welcome to the stage, brother. How you doing this evening?
Oh, I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Oh man, I'm doing fantastic, man. Happy Friday.
Yeah, you too, my brother.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Hey man, so let's just dive into it, right? So when you hear the phrase "the power of silence," what comes to mind?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is restraint. Restraint, restraint, because human instinct. Well, I won't say human instinct because it's not an instinct. It's just something we do, something we were trained and we're groomed for. So won't go that deep, but I say it's almost turned to a reflex to lash out to you know in in the young folk world, match the energy of someone, but in the end, I think when you stay silent, you don't give people that type of power over you to make you act a fool or go out of your character. So that's what I think of.
Why do you think people are so uncomfortable with silence? Like if you quiet for like more than 3 or 4 seconds, sometimes people just blurt something out. You know what I mean? They just like, it was just too quiet. Why do you think people are so uncomfortable with it?
Because everybody feel like they have to say something. People always feel like they have to give their input. They have to, they have to, they just have to say something. Like, you'll see people that say, "Oh man, I'm gonna call them out." Well, everybody saw this person. All 20 of our eyeballs saw this. Why did you feel the need to say something? But I don't know. Maybe it's something that feels heroic about it. Like, what, you think I didn't notice it? But it's just something where it's like a degree of superiority or something. I don't know.
Okay. What do you so people that can actually be quiet or maintain self-control long enough to, allow processing, what do you think that reveals about those kind of people?
Well, that is definitely a strength, and it definitely takes practice. And some don't, and if you don't have that strength, it's not a good or bad thing, but you don't want to give people that power over you if you got to walk away from them, because you can't. It's the things you can't control that's more frustrating than anything. You can't make this person close their mouth. So if you can't close your ears, just walk away. That's the only thing you can control. And option two is to lash out. And now you have stooped to their level. Now you didn't even start it and you find yourself apologizing for it. So that's just something to think about. I'm not auditioning for Dr. Phil's job, but just a little something to put under your tool belt.
Just a couple of resources to add to your tool belt. Got it. Got it. Have you
Right.
ever used silence to protect yourself personally?
Yes. Yes. And growing up growing up in Chicago, I was um I was actually perceived as a weak person because I walked away. I walked away from it because um because it was, I always knew what it can cost on the back end. I think somebody say something crazy, and if I win the fight hands down, if this end up going to court just because I couldn't restrain myself for that 2 minutes, I'm finding myself in court. I'm finding myself dealing with the police. I'm finding myself dealing with this, or even, some people lose their life because they can't shut up. So that's another way to look at it.
What made you think? What made you, I guess, have the maturity and the discernment to be able to choose to take that path versus the latter?
Well, it's I realized that when I did respond to something, I realized I was in a conversation that I didn't want to be in. I realized I was in that conversation, and I mean, it took some trial and error. I didn't just, I wasn't born saying, you know what, I don't need to confront this. But I realized at the end of the conversation, I was more upset. That person didn't change their perspective, and I'm still huffing and puffing about it after this person has gone and had a peaceful day.
Right, giving them control of your day, your mood, and your energy.
Yes.
That's too much power to relinquish over to somebody else. So I think one of the hardest things for people to do is let go, right? So that's a good transition point to holding on to relationships or expectations, dreams, identities, even pain sometimes. Why do we stay attached to these things that are hurting us so much?
Well, it's and I don't know if it's real or perceived, but people want closure. And I mean, the way I see closure, I see it as you're the one that got to close the book.
Okay.
You have to close that book. That person that did it to you is not suffering on the inside. So I think that's why people hold on to it. They're kind of looking for that person to tell them. They're hoping for the day where somebody just walk up to you and say, you know what, you were right that day, I was wrong. And that rarely happens. So I think it's almost like holding on to hope.
Yeah, so I think also too, because if that's what you're holding on to, I think that you might actually be looking for the wrong things, right? It's almost like you said closure,
Right.
some type of validation that you're looking for, or who was right or wrong, but never actually what the actual issue was. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And I think that's the problem is, they thinking that closure is gonna, like you said, whoever says who was right or wrong, but that's why they're still sitting there after that as well, is because that wasn't what they actually were waiting for either. But you know what
Yes.
I mean? The lack of skills or those other resources that you mentioned earlier going in that toolbox is, you know, which does not enable them to be able to figure that out.
Yep.
Would you say sometimes we don't hold on to people, we hold on to who they used to be or we hoped they become?
Yes. Yes. And that's why it's so hard to let go, because we hold on to, a lot of times people can show us their true colors, but we hold on to the concept of what we initially thought they were. And we also hold on because we feel like we're this far. We always feel like we're about this far from changing them and don't want to give up now. So I guess I could put in a football analogy. You think you was at the 99-yard line. I mean the 1 yard line. You think you was at the goal line, but you thought you were at that goal line for about 10 years. And you know, when do you realize, you know what? It's not happening.
Right. I think that's the biggest thing is you caught up in it, right? So with you being in the middle of it, you can't necessarily see the progress or the lack thereof. And that's why I try to tell, advise people, especially clients, when coaching them about the self-evaluation, journaling and documenting, writing those things down. So that way you have a timeline, you have a sequence of events, you know what I mean? You have this, it don't have to be necessarily chronological, but you have something on a piece of paper that you can go back and reference to and track your progress or lack thereof. And that's what I think people just don't have a lot of is ways of tracking their progress and ways of, positive feedback or negative, or constructive criticism, whatever you want to call it. But, people aren't as open to that. So a lot of people just find themselves just kind of lost out there.
Oh yes, yes. Because we all have a tendency to feel like we're the only ones, and in your, I don't know, I guess you could say in the back of your mind, but what's kept on the forefront is in the moment while you're going through it, you feel like you're the only person in the world that's going through it. You felt like you're the only person, you're the first and the last person going through it. And that's not true, but it feels like that at the moment. So
Right.
sometimes the moment has us so wrapped up that we don't take the time to rationalize and say, hey, I'm not the only one dealing with this.
So one of the buzzwords right now is everybody's talking about how men basically don't know how to ask for help. They don't want help or whatever it is that people are saying that's out there. But going with that, what would you say why we would think, we being men, asking for help is a weakness?
Well, as a man, from the time you can understand the English language or whatever language you speak, you always gotta put on this hard persona. And there's there's you gotta pretend nothing bothers you, which bites you in the butt, because when it finally bothers you so much, they're going to think you exploded over something little, but this was all building up because you never really offloaded it. You held on to it this long and it got heavy. And when you dropped it, it's the unfortunate victim that was there. You didn't drop the mess that 20 other people put in. One person had to catch it all. If that
So let me
makes
ask
any
you,
sense.
let me ask you a question, because everybody always starts out by saying, as men, you gotta do whatever you gotta do. Why? You know what I mean? In 2026, why are people still saying, as men, you gotta do? You know what I mean? Why? Because you can't say that about women as you should be doing, or you gotta as a woman. So if you can't say that, then why are we still taking the burden and the onus of saying, as men, we got to do X, Y, and Z? We ain't got to do shit. Let's figure it out, and let's distribute
Right.
some of these roles and responsibilities out, and let's figure out how to make this team a better team. You know what I mean? So I'm just trying to figure out why men are still going around saying, we gotta.
But I think it's still a pride thing, because I think when a woman is trying to help lighten your load,
Mhm.
when a woman is trying to help lighten your load, a lot of times they get treated like, they get labeled like, hey, you trying to be the man of the house. No, this woman is trying to make it a little bit easier for you. She's not trying to step on your toes.
Would you say
She
is that?
sees that you.
Would you say it's the actions, or would you say it's the way that she may carry herself? 'Cause I don't think that somebody will think somebody's trying to be the man of the house just because they're trying to lighten the load.
Um, everything is subject to interpretation. So, and it depends on what type of house you grew up in, because
Right.
if you grew up in the house where where the father just worked, provided, he didn't hug you, he didn't kiss you, He didn't say he loved you. He was like, oh, Dad. Well, they know I love them. I buy all this food for them. If you
Right.
come up in that household, you know, you can get these type of vibes in you.
Mhm.
But if you come up in a loving household where, a household where, just an example, where daddy changed diapers and daddy took the kids places and gave mom a break, they see a partnership instead of two people with different roles, because in a marriage you all have one common goal.
What's that?
That is to raise your kids, raise your and to prosper in a household. So, if you're willing to a man that's willing to wash a dish, a woman that's willing to do things in his lane, it depends on how well they mesh. So that's why you have men that grow up single that never bother learning how to cook, because they think a woman is supposed to cook. I ain't supposed to learn that.
Yeah, I
So
don't think that's as much these days, man. You can look at TikTok and all these things on social media, and you got a lot of men out here cooking dishes and doing all these type of things. So I don't think I think that's kind of an old mindset. I don't think, these younger
right,
guys are necessarily holding on to those older traditions that as we were growing up. I just, so I think as we get older and as we have these conversations, you got to be careful too, because we keep talking about these old ways that only people 45 and up are
right,
still holding on to, and not people, in the younger demographic. Then, we can miss a whole generation out there, because, you know, like you were talking about men cooking and doing those type of things. And so a lot of things, from speaking to clients, what I've been hearing a lot of is you can just have women that's not appreciative. They go to these parties and now these brunches, and some of the discussions may come up and they're comparing and contrasting on whose husband is doing what. You know what I mean? And using that
right,
as a barometer or a measuring stick. So again, as some of these roles are changing, and the women are adapting a more, like you said, performative in these households, and they also some of the men characteristics, of by them being in charge, they carrying the attitude as being in charge, and you know a lot of guys are suffering out there because some of those tendencies, are the women talking bad about these men, in other groups, not necessarily supporting them. So the men are actually out there doing these things, and they're not necessarily being supported, by that teammate. So everything is not peaches and cream. So just want to make sure we're
right,
talking about both sides of it and not just the one side of it. So some of those
right.
people that's
And
listening out there that's going through some of those things and aren't necessarily getting that support from that spouse that they're looking for. And I'm talking about men. So what would you say to some of these men, how to go about addressing that and, kind of curving that?
well, for the men that don't feel supported, um, now I always say internalize it first. Now, so you got to internalize it. So, because men, we are kind of I guess before you say someone doesn't appreciate what you do, are you receptive to the praise that they give you? Can you accept that praise? That's what you got to look at beforehand. Now, if you can look at yourself and say, "I'm accepting, I'm accepting for Father's Day gift. I'm, 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 I'm accepting. I accept these gifts from you." But a lot of men just don't. They keep this hard exterior. So if they're not, I mean, if you can check that box and say, yes, I do accept what's given to me, then you're in that realm. So now with that, to answer your question, I would say a man has to have that conversation with his wife and say, hey, I do a lot. Do you really, and just talk about rewards and things like that. That's not a fun topic, but it's something that has to be done. You got to talk to them and you got to let them know that I don't feel appreciated. And, I don't know a soft way to put it, but, everyone knows their mate.
Right.
So that's how you gotta feel it out because it's not gonna be a fun conversation no matter how you put it.
I mean, I don't think it has to be a fun conversation. I mean, just like at your work, if you're not feeling appreciated at work, I'm sure you're going to talk to your supervisor or whoever it is at work and say, "Hey, look, I would appreciate it, X, Y, and Z." And then you think about the relationships because now so many people are so in tune, I would say, with quote unquote their love languages, um, and their heart set on how they like to receive, said love. So I think that's the main thing too. Is like you said earlier, is you got to get to know yourself because I think a lot of people are just kind of, especially with social media, they don't really know what they want, like, or enjoy. They're just kind of going off of what everybody else is doing, and that's where the dangerous thing can come into play. Is you're trying to want and like what somebody else is liking and wanting, and when you receive it, you're not going to receive that same joy or feeling that that person is getting. So you have to think about that as well as for the hive mind folks that are kind of thinking alike in groups. So what would you say some of the dangers of keeping everything inside, right? So a lot of things that, especially being military, let's harp on that a little bit. So depression, grief, divorce, failure, financial stress, loneliness, to name a few things that a lot of people that we may know or come encounter with over the years of dealing with. What would you say
Well,
sometimes silence becomes survival? Because we talk about how people need to speak up all the time.
yes. Well, the way I would say that is and this has gotten easy over the years, and there's a lot more resources over the years. So like in the older times, this would have been a real difficult um situation to tackle. But for here and now, if you're going through the depression and all that, I think you should be ready and just the stigma ain't as bad as it used to be. So I don't think you should really be too worried about that part. That should not be your barrier. I know a lot of times we don't know where to start, and when you don't know where to start, you never start. So for for me, if it was you going through depression, just sit down and just talk to somebody. Talk to a good friend of yours. Talk to a friend of yours, and I mean a good friend, like as in a friend that can tease you a little bit about it, but be there for you. If that makes any sense. You need a friend that you and him can joke about it, and then he can say, "Oh man, well, you know what, It- bro, this is what you need to do." You need that friend that's gonna tell you, "Man, come on, I'll go with you." That's the type of friend you need. You don't need that friend saying you don't. Oh, you don't need to be talking to them. They don't tell you nothing. So yeah, I think that's where you should start. And you get home, you talk to your wife, talk to your significant other, and just let them know that I'm not really feeling like myself. And don't be scared to do it because if you get treated like less than a man, that's kind of an easy way to figure out if you with the right one or not. So I say don't be scared of that type of confrontation. That might be the fastest way to discover that you're with the wrong one. So I would say still talk to your spouse about it.
No, yeah, you definitely got to have a conversation. And I think the sooner you have those conversations, everybody fears the worst, but I think the sooner you have those conversations, the easier it gets. I mean, if you're trying to problem solve, then I mean, solve the problem. I mean, it just doesn't get any
Right,
easier than
right.
that. You know what I mean? I don't understand, you know, and a lot of people, especially adults, haven't really dealt with the trauma that they went through as kids. And they just tried to override it, just push through it, muscle through it. And that just doesn't help and doesn't work. You keep kicking it down the road and kicking it down the road. And then, like you mentioned earlier, the smallest things turn into the biggest things, and boom, mass chaos. And I think the
And
problem with that too is, we've learned how to deal with chaos so well that we just don't mind it. You know what I mean? It's like,
right.
okay, so well, shit happens. I deal with it when it happens. And then when it happens, you're upset, mad for a little bit. Some people may grab a drink, pop some pills and go to bed, whatever it is they do to get through their, with their vices. And then they just go through it all over again instead of just trying to fix the problem and then not having to worry about resetting every 30 days for the same exact thing. So I think those are some bad issues we have.
right. Sometimes you accept it as your normal,
Right.
and we do that because we don't want to sound weak. That's the biggest thing.
Right.
That's the biggest thing. And nobody, you still have flashbacks. Sometimes we still think about the reaction people gave you in high school when you express your displeasure towards something. That can affect you in your 50s, saying, oh man, he just weak. And you hear that person's voice ring in your ear. So yeah, a lot of that stuff you got to let go, because sometimes we don't think about the fact that if I saw this person today, 30 years later, this person has grown and matured, and this person more than likely will be telling me, hey Clinton, hey, pull back, get some help, man. Say, but didn't you say that? No. So a lot of times we don't. We always say we matured, but sometimes that inner child is still in us that's affected.
Well, yeah, you can mature and not heal, right? Because you're
Right.
just forcing yourself to deal with certain things in what you consider to be a more adult or professional way. So, I mean, technically you're maturing because you're changing your perspective on how you look at it. But then the things that trigger you lets you know how that you're still haven't healed from those things, those triggers. So
Right.
maturing and healing is two completely different things. You just have to be
Yes.
careful with that.
Yeah, and what I tell people is, I always say, if a good friend or whatever, I don't care what it is, if somebody did something to you, don't be don't beat yourself up about it if you can't let it go. If you But you have two choices, and this ain't no clinical research. This is just my thought. You have two choices. You got to either let the situation go or let the person go. I think you're doing an injustice to yourself and that person if you're still talking to that person about what they did to you. If you can't forgive, that ain't your fault. They may have broke your deal breaker within you. If they broke that deal breaker and you decide you don't want to be bothered with them again, that's how you feel. It ain't about whether you're a good person, they're a good person. If that's your deal breaker, and it was reasonable to know that this person knew what they were violating, and you can't forgive them, don't feel bad about it. Move on, but don't pretend you did. That's all I'm getting at. That makes any sense.
Okay, you said don't pretend you did what? Pretend you got over it, or
Don't pretend you forgive them if you're
oh,
still
okay,
going to
yeah,
keep
right.
bringing it up.
Right. Well, see, that's the issue. So people, well, that's what happens when you don't heal and get over. You can't get over it because something triggers you, and now you keep bringing it up. So that's the issue that people have. You know what I mean? Because one,
Right.
for whatever reason it is, the relationship that you have with that individual. So if you stop having that relationship, and then something, a memory, a song, the smell of a barbecue on the 4th of July brings up, that nostalgia of that person. You know what I mean? The scent of Axe body spray, whatever it is that makes you think about it, now that's triggering you, right?
Right.
You know what I mean? So you haven't got over it. So it's counterproductive. You can't really do that. I mean, a lot of people, again, we just force ourselves to say, just get over it. We're just talking about this yesterday, uh, called Man Up. But yeah, so you can't really do that. And that's what's wrong with it. That's why we end up taking one step forward and two steps back. So again, whatever works for you. But then when you encounter those issues and those problems, that's why you're having those problems, is because you haven't gotten over it. You're not talking to that person. Now you're talking to another person, and they're triggering you by doing the same thing that other person did. Right. So now you just eventually stop talking to half the population that trigger you, or do you figure out what
Right.
your deal breaker is and why it's a deal breaker? And, maybe, duality, right? It has to be a little bit of give and take. So, again, and everybody's different. Like you said, everybody has their own perspective and how they go about doing things. But just keeping an open mind, because, like you said earlier too, people do mature. So what could have been a deal breaker in 2006, might not no longer be a deal breaker in 2026. So, no, definitely, I got you. Good point, man. So, what
Yep.
made you want to talk about this topic, man? Did some trigger? You said you spoke to somebody, and they brought up some things. They was going through some things, or what happened?
Yes. This person had a significant other
Oh
that
shit! Don't say
cheated.
no names.
No, I'm not gonna say it. I'm not gonna say any names. But they had a significant other that cheated like about 7, 8 years ago and never did it again. But every argument that was always mentioned. So now at this stage of the game, and I told them, I said, well, I said, you're not doing yourself or her any favors. If you still talking about it, you didn't forgive. Now, don't feel bad if you want to break up, because that's not a happy home if that still bothers you. She's made changes. She haven't did it again. What more do you want right now? You didn't. I said you didn't forgive. You put that ace in your back pocket, prepared to play it when you're losing an argument or anything.
Right,
So that's what
right.
I think. I think it's like it's almost like ammo, like a dark cloud over their head, like that. So I told them, I said, you can't let the situation go. Don't feel like that makes you weak. Feel like that just lets you know that it's time to move on. Don't do that to that person. They're gonna get sick of hearing about it. And if that's still bothering you internally, you don't need to be with that person. Just let it go. You've tried for 7 years and you still can't make it past it. Hey, that's not your fault.
Did they
So
see? Did they speaking to anybody professionally, or they just been speaking to the neighbors?
no, no professional help was involved.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's what happens sometimes when you speak to other people that you know. They can give you insight, and they can give you opinions and perspectives from their personal perspective. Just being non-biased. You know what I mean? You just, obviously, there's still some feeling or something there. That's why you just refer them to, a professional to have that conversation, especially if they haven't spoken to anybody over the course of 7 years. Then I would just ask the question, how come they haven't spoken to anybody professionally? You can take it off them and just use that scenario, right? So if somebody that say they want to go
Right.
through something and they're looking for progress and they want to do better, but basically not drinking the water, you're just staring at the water and saying you're thirsty. So, how is it that you want to be better? You want to do better? You can pick up Chat GPT and Google all types of things on WebMD and diagnose yourself medically, but you can't figure out how to make your relationship better. And it's the simple things. It's just having a conversation, right? And those should just be basic skills. But a lot of times people don't have those basic skills and they don't want to talk to somebody about it and be told about their flaws and what they need to work on because they're too busy blaming the other person in that relationship. So yeah, hoping and wishing and praying it's going to get better over 7 years definitely won't do it. You got to put the work in.
Yes, and kind of funny after they broke up, they get along a whole lot better now.
A lot of people say that, you know what I mean? And again, that just goes back to those traumas, man. Not getting over those traumas, but then feeling that sense of freedom because you don't have to be held accountable. It's the accountability piece. That's what happens in a lot of relationships, man. They say we'd be better without each other. That's because they don't want to be held accountable to anything. Just go out and do whatever they want and then, call you when they feel like it. That's not a relationship. But, that's what a lot of things are kind of leaning towards these days.
Yep. Yep. And, when it's time to let it go, let go of all that resentment, all of that anger, all that frustration. And you know what? Then you get to see the person, you get to see the character that you like. So, it's like this person is a good friend and they're not a good mate. Who knows? But I'm not going to try to figure that out again. But yeah, so it's worked out. So they're pretty happy.
No, that's good. That's the only thing that matters, man. You know what I mean? As long as they figured it out. Hey, so we talked about silence being a negative. It gets a bad reputation. And some of the biggest transformations in life happens in quiet places, right? You've been deployed, TDY, you've been away,
right?
And you've had some time to kind of sit by yourself. It's kind of the same concept. You talk to somebody who's probably been incarcerated. They had some time to sit and think. You listen to people in the music industry, they come up with some of the best, artistry work and things like that. When you get to sit in silence, what would you say silence it taught you?
Silence teaches me to just sit back and do more thinking. If your mind is disturbed by anything, even if you're listening to music, you're gonna hear the lyrics and you're gonna have a mental picture of it, and it's gonna disturb the silent pattern where you're actually thinking. So that's a time where you reflect and you look back. And sometimes in silence, I look back at something I did wrong 20 years ago, and I look back at it and say, "Oh my God, I cursed that dude out for nothing. He was trying to help me." It's definitely a time to reflect. It's time for you to look at things and do better. So yeah, it's a lot of times people sit in silence and say, "You know what? When me and that dude was cracking jokes, if I would have said this, I would have brought down the whole house."
Yeah.
So a lot of crazy stuff happened in silence.
Yeah. Yeah, no, like you said, reflection, healing, prayer, growth, preparation. You know what I mean? All of those things take place in silence, man. It's just it just depends. It's completely up to you. Hey, I'm gonna say a couple of words and then you finish the sentence. All right. Let's try this out. Peace is
tranquility.
Letting go is
freedom.
Silence taught me
patience.
I wish more men knew
that they're not alone.
The hardest thing I've ever released was
my instinct to react.
Today, I protect my peace by
walking away.
Some great answers, man. Those some great answers. Hey, so I'm gonna let you get the rest of your evening. I know you got your granddaughter tonight, man. Just go ahead and take some time, man, to say some things, get it off your chest, and wrap us up, and then I'll close us out.
Yeah, and Dad, if you're watching it, happy birthday. Today is 83rd birthday.
Hey, happy birthday, Dad.
Hey, my mouse is moving crazy.
Okay, all right, go ahead. Go ahead, man. Close us out. Say something and get us out of here.
Okay, so I guess I would leave y'all with just move on with your life. Don't get occupied with that person that cut you off 2 hours ago. Don't come home mad about it, complaining about it. That person don't even know they upset you. The whole part about being cool and being that tough guy, leave that alone. That has gotten a lot of people killed in Chicago. Somebody who's got to be that tough guy, let it go. Let it go, because there's a lot of people that are in the ground who family wish they would have just been that punk that came home that day. So yeah, just let it go. It's not it's never worth it. It's never worth it, and value your peace. So it's not even about disturbing the other person's peace. It's about preserving yours. So that's about all I'm gonna leave y'all with tonight. But I enjoyed this topic. We're gonna collaborate, and we're gonna get some more, and we're gonna rock this out.
Hey, appreciate you, Clayton, man.
Everybody have a good night.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate you. That was a lot, man. If you're watching tonight and you're holding on to something, a relationship, a disappointment, a version of yourself, a hurt you never dealt with, maybe tonight is your reminder. You don't have to carry it forever. Silence isn't always punishment. Sometimes it's preparation. Sometimes it's healing. And sometimes letting go isn't losing. It's finally making room for peace. What is one thing you need to release so you can finally move forward? Drop it in the comments. Hey, Clinton, man, appreciate you for showing up, brother. We out of here.
All right. Y'all take it easy. Have a good night. Enjoy your weekend. Sir.